welcome to Lil's Vintage World. This video is going to be the wrap up of the classic books that I read in the month of January. Let's get straight into it as I have 4 to share with you and I don't want to be waffling on for too long. So starting off, I have The Graduate by Charles Webb. This is an American classic from 1963 and it is about a young man called Ben who comes home. He's graduated from college. He comes home to a family that has set out his whole life for him. His job, his career, essentially his whole life. And he rebels and he's like, no thank you. And he ends up having an affair with a married woman who's like a friend slash neighbour of his parents called Mrs. Robinson. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, are you trying to seduce me, Mrs. Robinson? That is from this book. I also believe 50 Shades of Grey is possibly like they pick bits out of this. I don't know. Let me know in the comments if that's true. I disliked this book with a passion. I don't like the word hate because I think it's a really strong word, but yeah, I hated it. I really disliked it. I thought it was vile. I disliked all the characters. I thought Ben was a brat. I thought his parents were vile. I really didn't like Mrs. Robinson with this, no. And do you know what? It was also really boring. This book I thought would be interesting. I quite like books about affairs and that type of thing. This book is 192 pages, so it's not very long. Yet it took me ages to read. I picked it up, put it down, picked it up, put it down. Oh, it's just awful. I know there is a film of this. I am not going to watch that film. No, thank you. No. That's what I think to that book. Awful. Awful book. I know I just threw a book, but trust me, awful. Don't read it. I don't know. You may love it. The next book that I picked up was Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. Look at this cover. This is part of the Penguin Ink series. Now this is a contemporary classic. I don't know what that means. I presume it means that in 50 years time it will be deemed a modern classic and in 100 it will be deemed a classic. I don't know. It just says contemporary classic, and these covers are beautiful. And these covers are designed by tattoo artists. Aren't they nice? Anyway, Notes on the Scandal, first published in 2003. So I don't get how it's a classic, but it's deemed a contemporary classic. So it's in this video. So this book I've had on my shelf for years and finally got around to picking it up. So this book is narrated by a woman called Barbara. Barbara is a history teacher at school. She's been doing it many years and she's narrating the story of a co-worker, a pottery teacher called Sheba. Sheba is like 41 and she's married and she has 2 children and she starts an affair with a boy at the school who at the start of the affair is 15 years old. Now, I bought this book many years ago because at the time I was seeing lots of people review it on YouTube saying how great it was, and so I picked it up, bought it, mainly for the cover. I think it's beautiful, and then it sat on my shelf for a while, and it sat on the shelf at the same time Lolita sat on my shelf. And I picked up Lolita first. And I hate Lolita with a passion. I know lots of people think that it's a masterpiece, that's beautifully written and all that. I could not get past Lolita's first page. Lolita is very much the same thing, but the other way around. So it's an older man and I think she's slightly younger. Is she 13, 14? Whether the boy is 15, doesn't matter. Still children, still inappropriate, still wrong, still criminal, still gross. And yeah, so I read that first and hence why I don't want to read this, because it's essentially the same thing. However, I will say this book is well written, this book is fast paced. I read this book in 2 days and I have no idea how I feel about it. It is a very uncomfortable read, it's a very uncomfortable topic. But it's very different because where I thought the power would be, I thought the power would be with the teacher. It's not. It's with the young lad. The 15-year-old Stephen, he is calling all the shots in this affair. He's the one that's pushing for the affair to happen in the first place. And then when she gives in, he's the one that's saying, oh yes, we'll meet, or no, we won't meet, and that sort of thing. And it's like, whoa. It was really interesting that this power dynamic changeover. But there are no likeable characters in this. Barbara herself is not a likeable character. Sheba is someone who, you know, needs to go to prison. And Stephen is just... I just don't know. It's weird because I read it and I carried on reading it. So I think the thing about Lolita is the person telling the story is the person that's the one that's in love with Lolita. Rather, this is not. I think if this was the same and Sheba was the one telling the story, it would have been exactly the same. Page one, put it down, no thank you. But because it's on that slightly outside perspective, I could read it. I thought it was okay. I thought it's well written, but it's very uncomfortable, and I don't know if I'll reread it again. I think it might be one that is going to sit on my shelves for another 10 years, and then in 10 years' time I'll pick it up again and be like, do I still feel the same about it? Yeah, it's just odd. I know these things happen. Then they're in the papers quite often. And actually, funny enough, that happened recently, wasn't there? In the UK, there is a teacher that's recently been convicted of having an affair with a pupil. She's denying it, I believe. But it does happen, you know, fairly often, unfortunately. And it's an interesting topic, but it's just uncomfortable. So, yeah, I mean, if you can face the uncomfortable topic, then you might like it because it's very well written, but I don't know how I feel. I know a lot of people really enjoy it, but I just don't think it's my type of book. So after that, I needed something light after those two books. I just realised they're very much the same, aren't they? Both about affairs. So I picked up this wonderful little read. This is Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris by Paul Gallico. This is from 1958. And this book that I have is actually a binder of Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris and the sequel, Mrs. Harris Goes to New York. I have only read Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. I have saved Mrs. Harris Goes to New York. So this is about a London char lady called Mrs. Harris, but she has a Cockney accent, so she pronounces it Mrs. Harris. And she is employed by many different people to do the char work. Now, if you don't know what a char lady is, she goes in and she does the rough, she does the fires, she scrubs the floors, all that type of thing. And that's her job, that's her way of life. And one day she's at one of her employers and she's opening up the wardrobe and sorting stuff out, and she sees these two beautiful dresses. And they're both Dior dresses. And the owner comes in and she's kind of almost showing off in a way. She's talking about them, being like, oh yes, they're this, they're that. Mrs. Harris wants to know how much they were, and she's like, oh, I think she said about £450 or something like that. And so she's like, right, I've got to save money. And so she does. She saves money in order to buy herself a Dior dress. So she saves money and then off she goes to Paris to get a Dior dress. That is the plot of the book, and it is wonderful. It is so funny and warm and charming. The lovely character of Mrs. Harris. Mrs. Harris is a wonderful character. Oh, I just love her. I read it in a day. I mean, it's not very long at all. I think it's about 120 pages, something like that. Yeah, 120 pages. So this bit is Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. This is Mrs. Harris Goes to New York. It's just wonderful. I didn't want to put it down, and I think it's quite sad really, because it's not a book that's spoken about much, but definitely deserves lots of love. And I decided not to carry on and read Mrs. Harris Goes to New York because I love this so much. I want to spend lots of time with Mrs. Harris, so yeah, I'm going to save that story for another day, but highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. And then lastly, for this wrap up, I have this wonderful, amazing binder of A Bear Called Paddington by Michael Bond and the illustrated by Penny Fortnum edition. So this book I found in a charity shop, but I read Paddington when I was a child and loved Paddington so much. So lots of these stories I remember from when I was a kid, and utter delight. I actually have a Paddington shelf, which is this shelf behind me. I love Paddington very, very much. This collection contains, is it 5 books? Yep, so in this collection binder we have A Bear Called Paddington, More About Paddington, Paddington Hats Out, Paddington at Large and Paddington Marches On. And I read this over a couple of months, I would say, just picking up a story every now and then, and it's just utterly charming. And I highly recommend that you pick up some Paddington if you haven't read it already, because it's just about this wonderful little bear that comes over from darkest Peru and is taken in by the Brown family, and you cannot go wrong with Paddington. So there we have it. Those are the classic books that I read in the month of January. Some were wonderful, some were and one lives on the floor in disgust. So chat to me all things bookish. What did you read in the month of January? What classic books have you been reading recently? And I shall see you soon for the next video. Take care.